Welcome everyone to this session, Bridging Finance Stream for the Agricultural Transition, co-claiming of carbon benefits and aligning carbon and biodiversity approaches in agricultural value chains. So this session explores how the agricultural transition can be financed through a mix of public incentives, voluntary carbon markets, private investment, and emerging biodiversity-focused approaches. It is co-organized by 3 members of the CAFAMOR project, a project which aims to develop EU-aligned digital infrastructures, tools, and knowledge for credible and robust carbon farming. So my name is Romane Jubera. I work at AgroSolutions, and I will be co-hosting this session together with Edouard Lancruette from AgroSolutions, Clotilde Tronquet from I4C, and Aaron Sheed from Ecologic Institute. So the session will be structured in 3 parts. Part 1 is a mapping of the different financial mechanisms supporting farmers in the agricultural transition. Part 2 is a discussion on the current challenges faced on the ground in financing this transition. And Part 3 will be a roundtable with Mars Company, OP2B, and Livelihoods, and also the Ecologic Institute to share their work on carbon and biodiversity and the solutions we are implementing on the ground. So maybe we can start by presenting ourselves and saying a few words. So AgroSolutions is a consulting firm specialized in the agricultural transition within the international group In Vivo that you may know. And we represent, the union represents about 200 agricultural cooperatives in France. So it's about half of French farmers. We are 50 collaborators, mainly agronomists, in 6 offices in France, and our main office is in Reims. We developed 6 different levers for the agricultural transition, working with agricultural upstream, so cooperative, fertilizer, seed and chemical industries, and downstream actors such as agri-food business. We have a strong expertise in the low-carbon transition and the preservation of biodiversity at farm level, farm scale, with the development, digitalization, and application of methodology to quantify environmental impacts of the agriculture and develop and monitor the transition. We rely a lot on field-informed advice with field trials monitoring since 1975, backed up by our scientific references, and we participate also in a lot of research projects that you already might know, such as Marvic, CAFAMOR, Biocapital, or CASDA Apprivoise. And now I will call my fellow colleagues to come to the stand to present their different structure. So Aaron?
Yeah, good afternoon. Aaron Scheid, Ecologic Institute. I'm coordinating the Agriculture and Soils team at the Institute. And Ecologic is a Berlin-based, science-based, independent think tank. And we are a bit of a hybrid. We do consultancy, mainly for public institutions, so both in Germany, but also on European level. And the other part is research. Both German research funded, but also Horizon projects. And we have been part of the carbon farming discussions from the beginning on, with the early on technical guidance for the European Commission to understand what carbon farming can be. Until now, also developing this idea and discussing that and framing the notion of the EU Buyers Club. And you just heard my colleague Hugh MacDonald at the panel also discussing on that. Maybe with that for the moment, and yeah, happy to be here. Thanks.
Hi everyone, so I'm Clotilde Tronquet. I work for the Institute for Climate Economics. I4C, we're based in Paris. We're around 40 people, and we do more or less the same thing at Ecologic Institute. So we do provide some analysis about how to finance the climate transition. And I'll leave it here.
So let's start with the first part, that is the mapping of the financial mechanisms. So the purpose is to give you a clear view of the different mechanisms that we want to discuss, to be able to have the same level of understanding of this mechanism. But first, we would like to share with you a testimony from a French farmers cooperative. So as a narrative thread, we will feature some videos at different timing in this session to show you maybe a more concrete example of how it is applied on the ground. And I will let my colleague Edouard present this testimony.
Yes, so just to introduce this short documentary that we have made with a cooperative we work with and with the farmers of this cooperative. So through this short documentary, we showcase the work of an agricultural cooperative in developing low-carbon grain and regenerative agricultural offerings. The cooperative play a key role in the low-carbon transition, acting as a link between, on the one hand, downstream value chains actors, such as agribusiness companies that demand low carbon and regenerative grains, and on the other hand, farmers who produce these grains. And the role of the cooperative most of the time is not very well known, so we wanted to highlight this. It's actually multiple, this role. It's first, it receives the demand from the value chain. Okay, I want X% decarbonized grain and regenerative-like grains. Then the cooperative defines, together with the farmers, the agronomic programs and practices that they can set up to reach the objective. And it also evaluates the cost of the transition and the cost of the data collection. And with all this information, it decides with the value chain what needs to be paid to the farmers for practice change, but also to the cooperative for gathering the primary data and calculating the impact according to the methodology that the agro-food company wants to fit with. And the cooperative we will see here has also another role, which is aggregating finance funds from biodiversity streams, carbon streams, local streams. So they build up everything. It takes time, so they take some share of the funds to finance their action. And a last point that we're going to see is all the work of research and development that the cooperative do. Like transition to low carbon and regenerative ag is not easy for the farmers. They need to rely on solutions. So the cooperative experiments on different scales, new solutions to transition. Based on the results, the farmers make their choice and adapt their practices. And this role is key, and most of the time it's not very well known. And the last point the cooperative is working on is to make research and development on KPIs, new indicators to monitor, for example, biodiversity. Like a lot of agro-food companies want to have KPIs on regenerative agriculture, but there is no holistic framework. And most of the time, the cooperative is the best suited to find these indicators. So they work with local laboratories to highlight what is happening in the soil, fungus developments, microbiomes, whatsoever, and they develop some indicators they can also provide to the agro-food companies. So I'm done with the presentation, and now we can launch the first part. Sorry, just to say, it's in French, obviously, but it's translated in English.
this more concrete testimony of what happened on the ground to finance the low carbon transition. We will try with my colleagues and partners to do a short mapping of the different financial mechanisms that exist. So we will discuss a bit about carbon credits, price premiums. These are mechanisms that the SCARA is currently mobilizing for the transition. And we will also discuss contractual payment for ecosystem services, nature credits, public funding, and integrated landscape finance. Yes?
Just a word before we move to clarify what we have just seen. Like the cooperatives was talking about tools. What they mean by tools, it's digital tools, MRV tools, that are connected to farm management system. So in the farm management system, the farmers provide the primary data that we use for calculating carbon indicators and biodiversity indicators. So one of our work at AgroSolutions is to develop digital tools that cooperatives use to process primary data to address all these kind of available or not mechanisms. And now we are going to discuss about each of these mechanisms. I think there is a question, but yeah, a short question. Yeah.
Yes, it's regarding the economical incentives, because the people in the video, you and the colleague from the cooperative, told about 25 euros for the
this was
in France,
for the carbon credits, 25
okay.
euros.
But in addition, they told that currently the brewery industry, the malt industry, are paying
much more.
Much more. Do you think those in the future, if it is not only for a cooperative, but all the cooperatives in the malt providers are going to receive this kind of incentives?
No, this is a point we'll discuss later on, is the scalability of the system. Okay. This guy was involved in the high-level program that paid well, thanks to our digital tools, but it doesn't concern all the farmers for the moment. But it's the topic we'll be discussing now.
Let's start with the carbon credits.
So I'm going to say a few words about carbon credits. I assume that everyone knows what it is, but just in a few words. So it's a result-based performance which credits emission reduction that are additional to what would have happened without the project. So there is no year of reference, like in the premium prices that were mentioned in the video. And there are also some other core criteria, including some on biodiversity and other environmental aspects that we'll mention later. A few words about what are the current trends on voluntary carbon markets. So what we're seeing in the last years is that the issuances, so this is the apricot column on the left, so the issuances of carbon credits from the projects have been dropping since 2021. The transactions between project holders and brokers have been dropping also, but the final demand, which is what we call the credit retirements, so once the credits are actually taken out of the registries, used, it's actually stagnating at a volume of approximately 200 million tons a year for an average price, an international price, of $6 per ton. So where is agriculture in all that? Well, it's clearly not the main sector. Here you can see it. Most of the voluntary carbon markets are on forest land use and renewable energy, and agriculture is only accounting for 600,000 credits traded a year, with a slightly higher price than the rest, than the average international credits. What are these agricultural credits? Well, they are being certified by the main standards internationally, so there is no surprise here. It's VERA, Gold Standard, Climate Action Reserve. But the activities that are being certified are actually mostly about methanization, manure management, and it's mostly industrial pig farming in China and cattle farming in the US. And these credits have been dropping in the last years. This is accumulated issuances for the last 20 years. What is beginning now is not anymore about methanization, it's about land management and soil organic carbon. Here you see what has been issued as credits for the last 15 years. So it's something about 10,000 credits a year, 20,000 credits a year. But then if you take the submissions to the Vera land management methodology that has been revised in the last years, then over the next 20 years, we should be having worldwide 100 million tons certified a year. This is all perspective, of course, but it's what's being submitted by the project developers. Where are those projects? Well, it's mostly in developing countries, India and Brazil, but actually Europe and the United States are not so far behind, and we have some major projects. Here they are. So we have something like a dozen projects, which are kind of above 10 million ton over 20 years program. And well, I guess that most of the project developers are at the Carbon Farming Summit for these 2 days. So you may meet them. And this raises quite a lot of questions because both on the supply and demand side, on the supply because it means that they're able to actually recruit a lot of farmers and they're actually competing on the ground. And on demand because, as I will mention later, we do have some problem with the demand for agricultural credits, I mean, at least in France. So who's going to buy all these future credits? Here it is. Oh yeah, no, but that's what I said.
Then we have a price premium.
Yes, some words on the price premiums. So the main mechanisms. Yeah, there's a question there. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So the price premiums, so it's the main funding scheme that the cooperative we've shoot the documentary is implementing, and they are the ones that are the most rapidly developing in the ground. Actually, what this cooperative explain, sorry, it's not moving, is that. Can we switch to the next slide, please? This cooperative we've shoot the documentary on started with carbon credit programs, but as they explained, it was not sufficiently paying, and even when they had produced the carbon credits, they couldn't manage to sell them because the demand, the market is not there. So they are now moving to price premiums. It's actually, the grain premiums is actually something very old in the economics of agriculture. It used to be paid by value chain actors for sanitary and technical quality criteria of the grains, formerly. And that's why now these agro-food value chains are moving and asking and proposing to pay premiums, but for low carbon and or regional characteristics of the grains. In France, it mostly concerns wheat, barley, and rapeseed, but it can occasionally be applied to other value chains. We have two kinds of payment schemes. The first one is practice-based. It used to be the former one. It used to be quite developed, but now it's mostly moving towards result-based because the companies that are paying want to be compliant with SBTi or with regulatory elements. And in the result base, we have two kinds of premiums. The first one pay for data collection, and some of them don't ask for improvement. They only want to have the data to have emission factors. They don't ask for improvement, but at least they do pay. So this money flows to the cooperatives for data collecting and processing the data to calculate the emission factors. And most of them pay also for practice change because they want to see an improvement. So the money is going both to the cooperative and to the farmers. And today in France is from very far the main funding scheme. As it was mentioned, from it's very heterogeneous, but from 5 to 55 euro per ton of grain, and from 50 to 250 euro per hectare and per year. So we estimate that in France in 2025 it was about 60 million euros that was invested in this kind of premiums. Next slide, please. But as it was mentioned, there is a huge limit to the scale-up of such schemes. First, because it's not compatible with carbon credits, because of the risk of double counts. The companies that do pay for grain premiums prevent the farmers to enter, most of them prevent the farmers entering into carbon credit programs. Second, and this is not well known, is that in France, we have less than 15% of the areas of the crops that are contracted with value chains. The other ones are crops produced for export or raw materials, and it's not under contract with agri-food companies. So it's not eligible. There is also limiting funding. The cooperative we've seen has very high-level contracts with luxury actors or niche market players. But the agri-food most of the time has pilot projects but can't scale their payments to the whole basin of productions. And also, most of the time, it's a limited profitability for the farmer. What the cooperative tells us is that once an agri-food player starts paying a premium, the first year, the second year, then it will, the agri-food will ask for more KPI. Okay, provide me with a KPI for soil, for biodiversity, for water, for regenag, but the amount of money is not scaled. So at the end, it's still not very easy with the fundings. And that's it for the grain premiums. But Clotilde, you wanted to say something?
Just a few words to tell you that we are starting a study on premium prices to evaluate the volume of funding that is going to this and what is its climate impact, since we're not always sure that it finances the fine practices. So anyway, if you want to talk about premium prices, I'm just available. That was just to mention this.
Thank you, Clotilde. So now maybe let's discuss contractual payment for ecosystem services. This is maybe a bit new in the financing landscape. So local and contractual PES are voluntary transactions where a buyer such as a water agency or utility, a food company or governments pay land managers like farmers to maintain or enhance specific environmental services benefits such as cleaner water, carbon storage, soil health or biodiversity. It was specifically well developed for water protection in France, but it's starting to upscale with other environmental services such as carbon storage or biodiversity preservation. And especially in the biocapital research project, we are working on the development of PES for biodiversity. So payments for ecosystem services are conditional on proven actions or outcomes. So this is results-based payments, ensuring also additionality beyond business as usual practices. And we insist on a contractual PES in this session to distinguish from other mechanisms. So in here you have a direct bilateral contract between the provider of the environmental service and the financer that usually benefits from the service. So PES schemes have been experimented in France as a key mechanism to incentive farmers and land managers to adopt agroecological practices. Since 2018, the launch of the French National Biodiversity Strategy. So nowadays it's framed by a regulatory framework, so that is being notified to the European Commission, and which provides standardized guidelines for indicator selection, performance assessment, payment modulation. Especially you have maximum payments per hectare that are proposed in the framework. The diagram here illustrates a bit the classical PES flow. So usually the buyer is like a water company or a collectivity, or a local authority that wants to work at local level, and so they pay the providers, such as the farmer, for improvement of an ecosystem services, but they rely a lot on intermediaries that could be a consulting company or researchers from university for control, technical support, facilitation. So, yeah. So the provider implements some actions or practices that improve the ecosystem services that is targeted, and usually payment for ecosystem services has the interest that it can target several ecosystem services and not only carbon or not only biodiversity, for instance. I just wanted to say a few words about an example that we have in France. It's the PADV organization that developed payment for ecosystem services with the water agency north of France. So they work both on upscaling regenerative agriculture. So this is more for the PADV organization targets, and they are working also on the good ecological status of water bodies. This is the target of the water agency. So it was initiated by PADV in partnership with food industries and local authorities and the water agency, and it concerns today 85 farmers. So it's a 5-year contractualization system where the food industries pay price premium for the farmers, and the public authorities, the water agency, brings public fund through the PES mechanism. So this is a good example of what can be done in terms of blended finance with the PES mechanism. And now I let you for Aaron.
Carbon is a really nice thing, right? Because it travels the world within 4 days, and it can easily be treated as a currency, because it is the same in India, in Uganda, or in Italy. It is a bit different when coming to nature. Still, there is now this notion of nature credits, which I quickly want to dive into. And why is it different? Because it is very contextualized. It is local specific, and therefore it makes it a bit difficult, even more difficult than with carbon, to build credits around nature. And the investment in nature positive action, valued and certified by an independent body, to then create a credible and tradable unit for buyers and finance outcomes, is something that is now being picked up by the EU roadmap towards nature credits, and there's also a dedicated expert group that just picked up their work. There is a bit of an overlap here with carbon credits when we look at the practices that are behind this, right? We talk about peatland revetting, we talk about increasing soil health, soil organic matter. We talk about biodiversity, which is also part of the mandatory requirements of the CRCF. So we have this overlap here, but still we of course have to also talk about, and this is one of also the benefits that we see here, we have to talk about stacking these different financing systems, whether we talk about biodiversity, the water imbalance, improvement of the water balance, or carbon. There is a few examples out there that try to do nature credits. Won't dive into them, but it's really early stage, and it's an emerging concept. And also the funding, which Clotilde very nicely showed for carbon. It's really difficult to do that for nature credits at the moment, to actually have a complete picture of what's going on in the market. We see that there is a market for voluntary biodiversity credits at around 8 million globally. And there is also a bit of public funding around, but there is a high uncertainty of really what's going on there, especially also when we look at the public funding. And I can show that in another graph a bit later on, because we know the Common Agriculture Policy hosts a lot of finances that also can ultimately be considered also be part of nature finance. But then it's really difficult to untangle this and say how much of the CAP budget actually goes into into carbon or into nature. Yes, the strength, it can increase the revenue streams, but there's also a lot of weaknesses, especially around the complexity and setting baselines, which are still ahead. Yeah, there's a question. Yeah.
Briefly, could you talk a little bit about the distraction from regulation, rather than perhaps being able to align with regulation and various regulations that exist? So, sorry. Hello, Åsa Lind, Initiative 1415 in Sweden. I just wanted you to, if you could elaborate a little bit about the distraction from regulation that you mentioned, just how you see that.
But sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, this says a weakness is that the nature credits themselves would distract from regulation and public funding. I understand the funding part, but regulatorily wise, could you elaborate a little bit on that concept, how you see that distraction?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
And let's pick this up because we have a panel discussion later on, and maybe we can pick up this question then to avoid that we're getting delayed at the very end, okay? Yeah, all right. Next up is the public funding one. And yes, surprise, when we talk about public funding, we have to talk about the Common Agriculture Policy, which is the dominant agri-food policy and funding stream in the EU. It's mainly activity-based funding, so the outcome at the end is not being measured. And the maturity level is very mature, and we have it since a very long time and a long history of Common Agriculture Policy. We have a total funding of 387 billion euros within this funding period until 2027, however not specified to results outputs. And there is also a result indicator 14 on reducing emissions or maintaining or enhance carbon storage. And on the other side, and here is the issues and the risks, is that, and this is also being mentioned again and again by the Court of Auditors, that we don't know how much mitigation impact of the action is actually being implemented. And if we look ahead to the next CAP, what we see here is that there is a reduction for the funding of the agriculture sector that is being likely. Yeah? We don't know for sure until we have a multi-annual framework decision being made this year, but it's being likely. And there is also a growing concern of reducing finance for environmental and climate-related measures. And what we also see is if we put agriculture, and this is now being the proposal at the moment, being in the budget envelope with other objectives like defense or rural development, that we suddenly face competing not within the agriculture sector, but even beyond the agriculture sector. And I think that will lead to even more negotiations, not only at European level, but even at national level, than where the decisions have to be made on where does the budget go. Do we need more budget for defense, or do we need it for agriculture, to put it very bluntly? And yes, of course, there's other public funding available, especially at national level. I don't want to dive into this, but of course the CAP is the dominant one. And the last one I want to quickly mention is the integrated landscape financing, which is, I think, an interesting one. Because it has the chance to bundle activities across farms and ecosystems to create larger investment portfolios instead of investing into single measures or into single farms. And we see that coming up even more and more, and we also see that in the CRCF, that it's not only about financing this one measure in one farm, but really trying to group the farmers and bundle the activities. And so it's really an emerging concept, which is conceptually well discussed in the literature already. So, but still early stage. And there's also examples already where this is being tried, but I think a very interesting financing model. And yeah, this is just one highlighting on where's funding available at the moment. That's from another horizon. It's not on landscape financing only, but what it shows is that, yes, there is quite a lot of public funding available. Yeah, but the sources are often not targeted at integrated landscape finance or financing nature positive activities or financing carbon enhancement. So, and then there is also a number of private investment funds available, but still fractioned and yeah, fractioned of the overall needs. So yeah, the strength of integrated landscape finance is really to make it cross-sectoral and stakeholder finance, and to involve the local community and engagement. Yeah, I would also like to take that one into the panel discussion and see and discuss that on what's going on here, and also the views of the corporates. Yeah, that's the conclusion. I think that's on you.
So one key message that we wanted to underline here is that there is no magical solution for the financing of the agricultural transition. So each instrument brings distinct strengths and clear limitations in terms of maturity, in terms of deployment, complexity and costs. So carbon credits and value chain premiums currently dominate the private funding landscape. They offer strong links to climate targets and buyers, and but they rely on complex and often heterogeneous MRV systems, face scale-up limits, as we already talked about today. They faced also market volatility and often struggle with long-term impact tracking. So after promising start, carbon credits programs seem now to be replaced by grant premiums programs, as mentioned Edward. So this is for the private sector. Public funds and public payment for ecosystem schemes remain also essential because they provide stable, large-scale budgets and can target multiple ecosystem services. But they are administratively heavy, politically dependent, and sometimes poorly aligned with real opportunity costs. And then we have the emerging nature credits and integrated landscape finance approaches that open promising revenue streams for biodiversity and landscape protection and restoration, but they are still experimental with high governance needs, integrity risk, and a lack of standardized metrics. So a major conclusion is that apart from public-based funding, there is also no guarantee on the demand side, and this is one of the problem we are facing. The implication of the research and the policy in here is that we must design a robust combination of these tools rather than seeking a single best mechanism. And to do so, we need to clarify environmental integrity rules, especially about double counting, and we will discuss that in the second part. Simplify the access also to the monitoring for the farmers, and better align private and public finance at the farm scale, at the landscape scale, and at jurisdictional, I won't make it, jurisdictional scale. In short, the challenge ahead is not only to mobilize more money, but be able to structure coherent, complementary portfolio of instruments that can deliver credible biodiversity and carbon outcomes while remaining practical and attractive for land managers. So to follow up, we will have a second video of our video testimony from the SCARA that will show how the practices are implemented on the ground. With a concrete example with a farmer. So I let you see the video.
Il y a évidemment des messages écrits, des messages techniques écrits, des guides pratiques, des réunions bout de champ, des réunions techniques en salle. Il y a beaucoup de supports pour expliquer comment faire et comment cultiver des orges ou des blés bas carbone.
Super. Bah maintenant, on va voir chez un agriculteur comment ça se passe.
Exactement.
Allez.
C'est parti.
Donc Fabien Leduy, sur la commune d'Ortillon dans l'Aube, agriculteur sur 150 hectares, en plusieurs cultures, céréales, betteraves, chanvre, luzerne, sainfoin, tournesol, et puis éleveur de poules pondeuses et de poulettes prêtes à pondre.
On a la ferme de Fabien Leduy qui est engagée sur un projet de transition sur 5 ans, dans les deux démarches en parallèle, le label bas carbone et les primes filières avec la SCARA. Le projet de Fabien Leduy a généré 500 crédits carbone. En fait, c'est l'équivalent de 38 voyages en Airbus A320 entre Paris et Barcelone.
Sur l'exploitation, on met aussi en place une réflexion sur la biodiversité, puisqu'on est aussi une exploitation où on est 100% sans insecticides. Ça va faire 6 ans maintenant qu'il n'y a pas une goutte d'insecticide qui est mise sur l'exploitation, et on y arrive grâce aux bandes enherbées et aux haies qui sont implantées. On a des haies qui sont implantées grâce à notre coopérative sur des contrats filières. On a des haies qui sont implantées grâce à la Chambre d'agriculture et la région via le Life Biodiversité. Et puis de mon côté, j'implante des bandes enherbées volontairement autour des parcelles, intraparcellaires, pour faire le gîte et le couvert pour les auxiliaires et me permettre de me passer d'insecticides. Après, la logique carbone est arrivée dans un deuxième temps, à savoir l'agriculture de conservation. C'est une logique où on travaille sur la biodiversité, la vie du sol, et les apports organiques. La première conséquence de tout ça, c'est 10% de perte. Il faut laisser à la nature sa part qu'elle doit prendre, et elle nous prend 10%. Financièrement, pour compenser ces pertes, on s'est tourné vers ce qui existait à la coopérative et on s'est dirigé vers les crédits carbone au vu des changements que je mettais en place sur mon exploitation. Dans mon mode de financement, j'ai confiance en ma coopérative. On a vu ensemble que mes pratiques et leurs contrats filières pouvaient m'apporter quelque chose. Je me suis arrêté là dans ma réflexion, ça m'apportera quelque chose, et on y va et on trace la route. Mais avec la logique coopérative, on capitalise pour demain et pas pour aujourd'hui.
Donc, je suis Camille Godot, je travaille à la SCARA sur le pilotage du bilan humique et sur les bilans carbone. Donc ici, on est sur le site de biogaz d'Arcy. Donc c'est un méthaniseur en voie sèche thermophile qui est le méthaniseur coopératif de la SCARA. Donc chaque adhérent de la SCARA peut apporter de la matière via les cultures principales ou les cultures dédiées ou également les cives. Et certains adhérents, donc ceux qui sont sur le plan d'épandage, qui fait à peu près 12 000 hectares, peuvent épandre des engrais organiques qui sont le digesta. Donc à la sortie du méthaniseur, on a un digesta solide et un digesta liquide qui ont différentes propriétés, qui sont amendantes et fertilisantes. Donc le liquide est plutôt fertilisant et le solide amendant. Donc ce digesta, c'est une vraie source de matière organique locale qui permet de pallier au manque de matière organique dans la région puisqu'on a très peu d'élevage. Et c'est également un point important dans les bilans carbone puisque cet engrais est un engrais plutôt bas carbone puisque son procédé de production entraîne peu de production de carbone. Et il permet aussi de rapporter de l'azote non minéral dans les parcelles. Et il est également possible d'utiliser cet engrais en agriculture biologique, donc tous les agriculteurs de la coopérative peuvent en profiter du moment qu'ils soient sur le plan d'épandage.
So yeah, we discussed a bit the theory, and now we see that underground there is also the reality of the project with the farmers, and especially the farmer that we saw here implement practices that are rewarded through the price premium and the carbon credits. And Clotilde will explain how it can be a problem today in terms of double claiming issues.
Well, I will actually say that it's not a problem, but this is IFOS's controversial opinion. So, in France, we have the label bas carbone, which has been working for the last 7 years, and agricultural projects have had quite difficulties to get financed. There are a few reasons for that. The prices are higher than the average price for carbon credits in the label bas carbone. Also, the narrative the storytelling about agricultural credits is actually less appealing than tree planting, which is most widely known. And then there is also a claiming issue. We have, as you mentioned, Edouard, agri-food industry that are afraid of losing the possibility to claim emission reductions or removal on their value chain if the emission reduction has been credited and sold somewhere else as an offsetting. And so in practice, now we've had last year the biggest project holder for agricultural projects in France, which has announced that it will stop launching new projects. We also have farmers that are actually trying to switch to other kind, like premium prices, to other kinds of fundings. So quite a situation. So the problem with double claiming. The thing is that some standards, including SBTi and the GHG protocol, ask that if a carbon credit is sold as an offset, because it changes everything if you call it a contribution, then no one else should be able to claim this emission reduction or this removal. Which means, concretely, that if you have, on a dairy farm, the implementation of low-carbon practices, and it's sold to, let's say, a telecom company, then the collector, the cooperative, let's say, that collects the milk, then the factory that would be making cheese with it, and then the retailer selling the cheese, and even the consumer, should be, in theory, adding to their own greenhouse gas inventories in order to unbenefit the emission reduction that has been made on the farm, which is impossible. But it does actually have some consequences. We have seen agri-food industry cooperatives really prohibiting farmers to actually come into label bas carbone initiatives, and themselves do not know how to claim emission reductions if they would use carbon credits. So that's what happened, and why we can live with double claiming, and it's not a problem. It's really okay to have double claiming between scope 3 emissions and a claim from buyers from carbon credits. Yeah, that's what I say. That's ECFS's controversial position, and so you can have different claims. You may have some active claims that would be like a financing claim from the ones that are actually paying, so the one or the ones, if they get together, for the emission reduction or the removal. And then you may also have some, I call it passive claim, but it could also be called a right to report. Which means that any value chain company on which the emission reduction might appear can actually see it, because it's just a structural feature of the scope 3. And I got an example for that, like an illustration, which is that if you want to make a thermic insulation on an apartment building, and you have part of the owners that are actually contributing financially to the insulation, and some, for whatever reason, because they are on social housing, that are not contributing, well, the thermic insulation is going to benefit the whole building. And even the owners that would not have paid for it. And it would make absolutely no sense to actually ask for these owners, well, since you didn't pay for it, you should actually put your heating up, because you should not benefit this insulation. So, and it doesn't take anything away from the ones who have financed it, that may effectively claim that they financed it. So that's the bottom of it. And then there are also a few reasons, because it's for it not to be, well, it's impractical, because so far most of the inventories are done with emission factors that are general one, and that anyway do not perceive, they didn't see the emission reductions from a project at the moment so far, even though the inventories are getting better and better. But so far, the very building of it, it makes it as if, I mean, you wouldn't even see it. And then anyway, if you wanted to stick to this rule, no one can actually today verify it. No one is able to check if the credit that was sold on a low carbon project was sold as an offset, and there is no common structures between the registries from carbon standards and company inventories. And last but not least, in France, at least it works for the label bas carbone, the French government is okay with double claiming between companies, the value chain companies, and the sale of carbon credits, even though they may be sold as offset. And obviously, regulation prevails over some voluntary standards as SBTi and greenhouse gas protocol are. Yeah, this is it. Last videos.
So this was a first challenge on the ground, illustrated by Clotilde, that can today at least lower the implication of agri-food business in the financing of the transition. Another challenge on the ground is that currently agri-food business asks for more and more metrics, KPI, because we are not only talking about low carbon, but also regenerative agriculture. And so they require biodiversity, water retention, soil health metrics. And so cooperatives on the ground need to innovate and to work on that so that they can provide the right metrics. So we have a last video to show you how the SCARA put in place innovation and metrics to support the transition.
On a vu sur les parcelles de Fabien que le sujet biodiversité était important. Dans le cadre des filières, chaque filière souhaite évidemment décarboner ses productions, mais la décarbonation doit systématiquement être accompagnée de services écosystémiques et de biens et de gains environnementaux. Et donc un certain nombre d'indicateurs sont mesurés et viennent accompagner le fait de réduire les émissions ou de stocker du carbone. Donc dans ces indicateurs, on va retrouver à la SCARA la fréquence de mycorrhization pour parler de la fertilité biologique des sols. On va aussi retrouver un certain nombre d'indicateurs de biodiversité, la couverture des sols, la composition des couverts. On va calculer des indicateurs comme les indices de fréquence de traitement, les IFT, pour montrer que la biodiversité, on l'a vu avec les haies, permet de réduire les insecticides. Et donc la mutualisation de tous ces indicateurs permet à nos clients, dans le cadre des filières, de montrer la compétitivité environnementale de nos productions. Donc là, on est sur une parcelle de luzerne, on est toujours sur l'exploitation de Fabien. L'exploitation de Fabien fait partie d'un club d'innovation, le club Innovation SCARA, qui travaille sur la fertilité des sols depuis 2013. Et donc sur cette parcelle, on est en essai long terme depuis 2017 et on a divisé la parcelle en trois secteurs. Un secteur où on est uniquement en fertilisation minérale, une partie au milieu de la parcelle où on est en fertilisation organique et minérale, c'est-à-dire que les apports d'engrais de fond se font en organique et on vient complémenter l'azote en minéral. Et puis la troisième partie de la parcelle est uniquement en apport organique, il n'y a pas du tout d'engrais minéraux. Donc sur cette parcelle, on suit un certain nombre d'indicateurs, notamment des indicateurs du sol et en particulier de la biodiversité du sol en suivant les populations de bactéries, les populations de champignons et un indicateur qui nous tient particulièrement à cœur et qui permet d'étudier l'interaction plante-sol qui est la fréquence de mycorrhization. Donc ce sont des champignons qui créent des symbioses avec les racines des plantes et qui permettent à la plante finalement d'aller explorer davantage de sol et de mieux valoriser l'ensemble des minéraux qui sont susceptibles d'être puisés dans ce sol, en particulier pour la champagne crayeuse, le phosphore et les oligo-éléments. Et les apports de matière organique favorisent cette mycorrhization, favorisent les populations de champignons et donc favorisent caractérise finalement la biodiversité qu'on peut mesurer au niveau d'un sol. Une plante bien mycorhizée va, au travers des analyses de sève que l'on fait sur les cultures, permettre de montrer qu'on absorbe environ 12% de phosphore en plus et qu'au niveau des oligo-éléments ou du magnésium, on améliore l'absorption d'environ 25%, sans rajouter davantage d'éléments nutritifs en minéral. Le fait de mieux alimenter la plante en phosphore, en oligo-éléments, ça permet de mieux faire fonctionner les enzymes de la plante qui vont utiliser l'azote. Aujourd'hui, l'analyse de sève elle est primordiale puisque d'une part, c'est comme chez l'humain, c'est une prise de sang chez nous, là c'est une prise de sève. Elle permet de révéler dans un pédoclimat donné, avec des précipitations plus ou moins importantes, avec des réchauffements de température plus ou moins importants, elle permet de montrer ce que la plante est capable d'absorber dans le sol en termes d'éléments nutritifs. Et cette prise de sève vient nous révéler quelque part les carences qui pourraient être observées et nous permettent de corriger en foliaire sur des applications à microdose, de venir corriger ces carences, et notamment sur la partie phosphore, magnésium, oligo-éléments, pour aller valoriser mieux l'azote, sachant que la stratégie, c'est de réduire cette dose. La fertilisation azotée sur une parcelle de blé ou sur une parcelle d'orge, c'est 70 à 80% des émissions. Dans le cas de développement des filières, autour de la question du carbone, l'ensemble des filières aujourd'hui s'orientent sur la thématique de l'agriculture régénératrice avec un nombre conséquent d'indicateurs à suivre. L'ensemble de ces indicateurs qui doivent être suivis, analysés et aussi dans le temps pour que l'agriculteur puisse progresser nécessitent un suivi constant, nécessitent une force d'analyse importante et donc des frais conséquents qui doivent être pris en charge dans le cadre de ces filières pour soutenir à la fois l'agriculteur et la coopérative qui l'accompagne.
Yeah. Yeah, you can.
Some word for transition. So a key message we got from this cooperative is that, okay, we're talking about CRCF and how a global scheme can apply, but what we see is that in the fields, the farmers, the farmer cooperatives are building and developing their own tools to answer to the market. And here we saw a lot of agronomic innovations to answer value chain questions. And now Roman is going to present you a program we've been working on biodiversity, because we work a lot of carbon, but as we've seen, the value chain asks now for biodiversity. It's very hectic and complex to monitor biodiversity, so we've run a multiple years program to identify why key indicators could be implemented in the field. And so I now leave the floor to Roman.
Thank you. So, yeah, the first step to answer value chain's needs regarding regenerative agriculture is to be able to quantify and monitor precisely carbon and biodiversity. And this is something we, AgroSolutions by InVivo has been working on by integrating advanced calculation tools into our SMAC platform, the French leader farm management system called SMAC-TRAS. So SMAC-TRAS simultaneously assesses carbon metrics and biodiversity impacts, providing agri-food supply chain with actionable insight for sustainable sources. So for biodiversity, these indicators are sourced from the Apprivoise project that is issued from the Special Allocation Fund for Agriculture and Rural Development, and that was led by Arvalis, AgroSolutions, Diacta, SMAG, and the SCARA, the cooperative that we saw. That is a project financed by the Ministry of Agriculture. So the indicators that were selected, actually, they overviewed more than 200 indicators for biodiversity, and they test on the ground with the farmers and the cooperative the ones that are the best suited to monitor the transition on the biodiversity side. And what they, the conclusion that they had is that they retained 6 indicators that can provide a good overview of biodiversity gains at the farm scales. So there is the number of soil cover days, the soil disturbance from tillage, the floral interest of crop rotations for pollinators, landscape quality for grey partridge, aerial biodiversity potential. So the aerial biodiversity potential is actually a combination of metric on the size of plots, the crop diversity, and the presence of ages. And the last one is ecotoxicity of phytosanitary programs. So these indicators are now integrated, well, it's on development, into the same tools that we use to measure carbon footprints at the farm scale. So we can have programs that address both carbon and biodiversity. So now that we can properly monitor carbon and biodiversity indicators, how about funding the transition? What about the available money on the table? So we discussed a lot about the theory. We tried to bring a bit of concrete examples with the videos, but now the best part is to hear about our panelists that are facing these challenges on the ground day to day. So please, panelists, you can, maybe we can arrange a bit the chart. I don't know.
Okay. Both ways are fine. Okay, so. Oh yeah, you don't see anything this way. You're okay this way? Okay, anyway. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation today. Maybe I'm not going to introduce yourself, I'm going to leave it to you. So we're very happy to have you here and have your contributions. So our first part will be, so if you could just introduce yourself, tell us about what is your climate action, and if you have some concrete examples and numbers that we can figure out how you actually act on the ground in approximately 3 minutes each.
Shall I start? Yeah? Okay, great. Hi everyone, nice to meet you. I hope no one did what I did and had some ice cream at lunch and now is having a bit of a sugar low. Anyway, we try to keep the energy. So my name's Kate. I am joining from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is a global coalition of businesses working to drive the transition towards sustainability. Today I'm representing a coalition within that called OP2B, One Planet Business for Biodiversity, which is really a Europe-focused accelerator aiming to catalyze the transition to regenerative agriculture. OP2B is made up of about 25 businesses in Europe. That includes some large cooperatives, some traders, through to kind of brands, processes. And like I said, the ambition is all around catalyzing the transition to regenerative agriculture. So in terms of numbers, the kind of target we have in mind is around 40 billion hectares under regen ag in Europe by 2030. Right now we're at about 15%, so the challenge is to kind of triple that. So just coming back to OP2B's role, well, maybe reflecting on the kind of financing stack, actually. So the members that we're working with, the focus is about in-value chain action, right? So of that financing stack, to date, it's been much more about the kind of price premiums piece, right? So companies trying to work with farmers in their value chains, offering them incentives for particular practices or outcomes. I think we see a limit of that approach and a challenge in how far that approach can take. And that's a couple of reasons. There's challenges in terms of the scale of businesses that are actually making that investment today. So I'm sure others on the panel can speak more to this, but if a business is one within a value chain, for them to be able to scale that, they really need to be able to share those costs. If they're off-taking just one commodity from a farm, there's a need to share that with other off-takers. That doesn't always happen, so we really need to bring more businesses on board. As well as look at a kind of more of a stacked approach. So it was cool to see the different mechanisms there and interesting to think about how they can work together to offer this package of support for farmers and there's probably even other ones that could be added to that, right, around like the role of banks or development banks or insurance, etc. So that's really interesting. And sorry, just very quickly, you asked, so the role of OP2B. So some of the things that OP2B is doing with our members to support scaled finance. 3 things I would mention. There's a focus on kind of matchmaking. So setting up a regenerative landscapes map in Europe of where our members are investing, trying to matchmake folks who are active in similar landscapes and bring in others from the value chain into existing programs. There's then, secondly, some programs where we're more actively partnering on the ground. So one example is in the east of England, working with Lens, who was on a panel earlier today, and others looking at, okay, and then how do you actually put that financing stack together? What kind of capital's coming in from the private sector? Where is the public sector playing a role? Water utilities companies, others, and what does that stack look like? And then a third focus area is on public policy engagement. So this is where we're very pleased to be informing the development of the CRCF and looking at, how could a buyers club catalyze more finance from the private sector.
Thank you. Caroline?
Good afternoon, everyone. Caroline, I'm working for Mars, a company that you might know better from some brands we have. So in snacking, we have brands like M&M's, Snickers, and then in pet care, we have brands like Royal Canin, Pedigree, Whiskas, if some of you have pets. You might know about them. So the approach we're taking when it comes to carbon farming as a company is really much look like what you described, Kate, which is for us, it's really first and foremost investing in our value chains globally. So if we look globally, actually, we invest into cocoa, in peanuts, in mint. But maybe closer to us here in Europe, we have some important programs ongoing on dairy. And actually, thanks a lot for mapping a bit everything, because I think that will help me explain a bit what we do, because we have different approaches depending on the commodities and ingredients we speak about. So on dairies, the approach we're taking is really partnering with some of our suppliers and signing long-term agreements, long-term contracts with them, and rewarding them through, rewarding farmers through extra premium. So that's a choice we've made because it really helped us work with some of our close suppliers, which are actually cooperatives. So I can name a few, like Friesland Campina, Lakeland Dairies, DMK, and we've co-worked at top-to-top level to have like a business plan over a couple of years, but also a sustainability plan. And this enabled to unlock funding from the very beginning, because specifically when you speak about livestock, for instance, think manure management, you need important investment at farm level from the beginning. You can't really wait for the outcome, otherwise it will never start. So that's one approach. But then a different approach we take is on cereals. So for our pet food brands, we use wheat, oat, barley, many different cereals. And there, we're more working through a certificate approach. So actually we work currently with around 300 farmers across the EU. We cover roughly 60,000 hectares of land. So to give you a sense, that's roughly the size of Luxembourg. So that's quite significant. I think we speak a lot about pilots, but we're beyond pilots today. I mean, it's taken some time, but here, yeah, we go more with certificates. So what we do very concretely is actually supporting farmers first by paying some agronomic advice when needed. So working and partnering with companies like Biosphere, like Soil Capital. Some of you might be in the room actually. And then buying the certificates as the outcome from the farmer to further reward the outcome. And maybe a very last one, I'm a bit less familiar with the mechanism, but I think it's worth mentioning, and it wasn't necessarily captured on the slide, on rice specifically, because we have the brand Ben's Original, we source a lot of rice, and there we work more through an audit perspective, so we work with the Sustainable Rice Platform, and actually would pay a premium for farmers who have been audited through this framework. So that's yet another mechanism, but just to say it's not one size fits all. CRCF's promising, Buyers Club's promising, but I think it's great to put together like a big landscape. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm representing Livelihood. Livelihood, we have a company that has been created 15 years ago, and to answer to request from some companies that would like to invest on environmental programs with also social impact and that has some shared value on how investing together to share risk and also to reduce the cost of developing some programs. And now we have around 50 programs that are running around the world for carbon program, but also in the value chain of investors that we have in our programs and in our company. We have some program in Asia, in Africa, and in South America. And more recently, we are developing some program in Europe. For this, also answering to the same question for our investor, it's how can we share the cost and the risk by investing together in a farm? And it's especially the case when you have a crop in rotation. And it's what we are doing since now 3 years. It's putting together the several off-takers, several companies, to co-finance a transition in a farm that it's able to transition farm to another step of carbon, but also this is the philosophy of livelihoods. It's also impacting biodiversity and have also socio-economic impacts. And regenerative agriculture is also this for farmers, and we have several projects like this. It's also at mid-term providing some real benefit and social benefit for farmers that are saving time on their farm and increasing also their profitability by decreasing the cost. And for us, carbon credit or carbon finance, it's also a way to start a program, include some money at the beginning of the program, and after providing long-term asset for a farmer with with decreasing cost linked to the programs that we are implementing.
Thank you. I will leave it to you. We have one further question, Aaron, if you want to.
Yeah, maybe it's a question and consideration at the same time. Because I recently, and we just heard also from the corporates, what they're currently doing in the field of carbon farming, regenerative agriculture. And I recently also had a discussion with a big insurance company. And they're currently setting up a venture capital fund to invest into regenerative agriculture. And when I asked them, what do you actually invest into? They said biostimulants. So what we actually see here is that there is investment. They claim it as regenerative agriculture, but it's not happening on farm, but it actually goes into the value chain. Big industries producing biostimulants that then may be being part of the solution of regenerative agriculture. And here I see its challenge at the moment, that we have a clear signal from the corporates saying there is demand for regenerative agriculture, for carbon farming, for nature credits, and so on. There's also the supply side being ready, farmers being ready. There is a CSCF being established, but then suddenly we don't have a match. Because the farmers, and this is something I touched upon before, are usually small scale, maybe not well organized unless we have like cooperatives behind, like bundling the farms. And then we have the business sides seeking for large investment portfolios that actually farms usually can't deliver. And this is a bit of my worry, and that maybe my question back is, how can we ensure that there is a match between farm supply and then corporate demand to ensure that match and avoid having in 5 years, 10 years realize that we actually kind of passed this point and missed each other here. Yeah.
So if you want to add something on that?
I mean, it's just some thoughts. I think here we're representing, but you stop me if I'm wrong, relatively big corporations. But if we look at the landscape of, for instance, the food value chain, there are a lot of SMEs. And so here you're thinking like of a perfect matching, and assuming every companies would like chip in, you would need like a mechanism that creates a level playing field across every actors. And so in a voluntary landscape, there can be some mechanism to support this, and I think that's what the European Commission is reflecting on, lowering some of the side costs to start with, because not all the money we put in a program would go to farmers. Some would go to MRV, some would go to purchasing impact factors that are actually matching the programs we do. All of this is side money that doesn't funnel to the farmers and that smaller companies really can't afford to have. So already if you eliminate this, you could potentially have a bit more demand, but you might still have some actors who are not interested in having that middle cost. And so that's where this idea of having several parts of the value chain coming in can even further decrease the cost at one level of the value chain. So if you go, with a retailer and the processor and the manufacturer, it even further reduces the envelope while still delivering for farmers. That can be another one. And then you might even think at legislation mechanism, which I think were part of the thinking from the Commission at one point, which were, for instance, should there be mandatory Scope 3 reduction targets, at different parts of the value chain, for instance, to really level the playing field. So that's a complex question you're asking. Those are just initial thoughts. Again, I think the Buyers Club can potentially increase the demand. Will it increase it to the perfect match you're describing? I think it's to be seen given the landscape we're observing.
Do you want to, or if you want to?
Yes, for us, and we are dealing with some farmers, and for them, yes, we are speaking about very technical things in this kind of area on carbon credit. And when we saw in the video, when a farmer, it's more speaking about what is my soil health, how can I invest on my soil, and this is speaking very well to a farmer. Speaking to a farmer on a carbon credit, it's something that it's not tangible for him. But speaking about what is the fertility of my soil, how carbon in my soil increase the fertility, it's really something that it's really tangible for him. And it's really what we need to have. It's this kind of way of discussing with farmers.
Okay, great. So you kind of started to answer the second question, which is what are for you the success factors or the barriers to scale up this kind of dynamics? So we've seen quite a few formats for funding. So which one do you manage to use? How do you cooperate with other value chain actors? I've mentioned the double claiming non-issue, but if you have anything to say about that, or as you mentioned also the role of the public sector, and how could it help you to scale? Shall I go back to this?
Enablers. I think, as we've said, the private sector is investing. We want to see more. We need to make it easy for businesses to do that, especially businesses who, as we said, are not yet investing or perhaps could invest more. And I think there's probably two main themes which I think have come up in all the sessions that I've at least been at today. There's a big point on frameworks and data. So we need data that can power investment decisions. So at a farm level, of course, but also at a corporate level, right? Corporates also want to know that they will be rewarded, ideally, for sustainability performance. So there's a linkage that needs to happen between the outcomes we track at the farm, how corporates report on that to their stakeholders, their investors that ultimately can kind of offer some of those incentives as well. So, and that system, as we've seen, is currently fragmented. There's challenges around interoperability. And that's where CRCF, I think, can play a role in terms of saying this is a gold standard at an EU level, trying to build some of that alignment. I do also think, just on that point, there's maybe a job for the community. In the panels today, I've also seen such great examples of implementation project developers already happening on the ground. So there is already amazing data out there, and there are already programs that are providing that. So I also think, yes, we want to address this kind of fragmented ecosystem. There's a lot of work we can do on framework standards, MRV, but I think we also need to communicate that companies don't need to wait for something to be fixed, right? There is data there today that companies can use to make investment decisions. So I think that's, maybe a consideration we're trying to keep in mind as well. And then the kind of flip side to that is this financing stack. And I think for now it feels, you mentioned the landscape investments piece, which is definitely where companies are moving to, but it feels right now very kind of bespoke and manual. And like you do one landscape project and it's got a particular stack, and then you look in a different context and it requires a different stack. Which to a certain extent is true, but I think there's a need for kind of more replicable blended finance models, which we can start to use to scale rather than feeling like it's very bespoke and it kind of slows things down. So that would be some key kind of priorities we can see, and both of which I think CRCF can play a role in.
Great, thank you. Caroline?
Well, I can only echo the point on blended finance. I think you asked a question on the role of the public sector. Yes, there is a matter of creating, enablers to help new joiners come to the demand market, but there is also a need for public funding. I mean, when we look at the figures, I was re-looking at one of the report from Antithesis from 24, where they were saying it's between 28 and 35 billion euros needed for 1 year, at least at the start, which is needed. So no private actor alone will be able to achieve this, and the blend here will be absolutely critical. And then on the data, I was just reflecting as well on the video you showed, and where the farmer was mentioning, and I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for this. Yeah, every corporation will come and ask for their different set of KPIs. That to me doesn't make much sense. And I think, the DG Agri proposal to set a common compass, I think can help not only the farmers, but also us as corporations when we want to work together in the value chain. So I think of a project we have, for instance, currently in Poland, where we work with farmers on different crop rotations with Pepsi and ADM. So the way it works is that Mars would buy the wheat for pet foods, and I think Pepsi will buy the rapeseed for their crisps. So at least you reward, the farmer on different of their rotations. But I bet that we have different ways of measuring. Even though we use SAI, and we have like good discussions in the SAI platform, I'm ready to bet we have different things. So I think it's great to have this discussion starting, because that can be also an unlocker, a cost saving, a simplification for farmers, but also for corporations, and simplifying a value chain approach at several levels.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, and I can just confirm this, because it's really what we are doing in our project in Europe. It's putting together some company in the same rotation, co-financing a transition with several benefits. In fact, it's several benefits for the companies that are investing, because when you are supporting a farmer, instead of each company supporting one farmer, it's a common framework for the farmer. That it's also important when they are speaking about administrative burden. If each off-taker or company is asking for a different framework, it's a mess for a farmer. And putting them together, aligning on the same framework, is something very important. And something very appreciated by the farmer and also by the cooperative, and because the technician also prefer to have only one framework instead of several. And I think it's the role to align the company and becoming more and more aligned, and this is nice to see this. And on carbon also, align methodology on emission factor calculation. It's something that is becoming more and more important. The sequestration in soil also, it's a topic for company. They are starting to investing in, but methodology are not aligned at European level or at international level, and providing something that is relevant for company is very important. Manage also the permanence when you are speaking about carbon storage in the soil, because there is some standards that are asking you to monitor this for all the life of a farmer when investing in a project. If you are able to contract with a farmer for 5 years, it's a lot. And after, how are you managing permanence after 5 years? And this is where I think the public sector also can play a role to secure farmer and company to manage this permanence.
Great, thank you. We actually had a third question on the biodiversity aspect, but if we do so, we won't have any time for questions. So I think if anyone, we're going to take 2-3 questions from the audience, if you have any. Or if you don't, we'll ask a question. Yeah.
Thanks. I have a question, not for the panelists, but for the presentations before. I come from Foundation Global Nature in Spain. And when you say that nature credits are still emerging because there is a lack of market, that's for sure, we have a lack of market too in carbon farming. But yes, I would like to bring here that my entity, we have developed an approach to measure, verify, and monitor biodiversity in agrarian systems, and we're going to introduce it tomorrow in the Carbon Plus Nature session, just in case you are interested to come and have a look at it. Because we can, it's based in a metric-based approach, and I think it's very mature. We have been developing it in the last 5 to 10 years with agro-industries, and just to let you know that there is a way to do it, and it's affordable, and it's comparable, and you can use it for 1 year to have data on biodiversity, and just to let you know that we will introduce that, because I saw in your comparison that you didn't find very good methodologies to measure biodiversity and have claims on that. So just to let you know that we have something interesting for that.
Okay.
I'm back to my question before. Is that bad?
Oh yeah.
Okay, maybe we can take a few questions. Yeah.
Well, I don't have a question, but I have a couple of comments, and I will take them as complementary comments, perhaps. Yeah, sorry. I have a tendency to move around my hands because I'm Spanish. But Aaron, during your presentation, you mentioned the Court of Auditors report from September 2024. And that report was saying that the CAP is not doing enough. So perhaps to complement, I would say that there is a study from the EU CAP network from May 2025 saying that over the period of 2023 to 2027, the CAP is expected to deliver 35 million tons of CO2 equivalent in terms of emission reductions and removals. So we're going to talk about the CAP potential, let's take both reports into account. But of course, the CAP is not the primary objective of the CAP is not to deliver on carbon, but all the support for farmers, though it does have a dimension for that. Now, the CRCF in the country that has the objective to deliver on carbon removals, and perhaps here I will turn to Clotilde, and that's a comment towards you. I fail to understand your point about the claims not being, double counting of claims not being a problem. I do think that there is a problem securing a demand if we don't know what we use those credits for and how can companies claim those credits. So perhaps a little bit more refinement, or perhaps it was a misunderstanding from my side since it's Tuesday afternoon and I'm quite dense. But I do think that we need to ensure there are rules on how to claim those credits so that there is demand from the market and the farmers can upscale the practices. So That's everything from my list. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe one last point. Are there other? Oh, okay. Two remarks or questions.
Yeah, thanks. Antoine from Clim, so we are project developer and MRV provider. I think one of you mentioned during the presentation that with premium pricing, usually it gets stuck at the pilot level. I think it was coming from you. I was wondering if you had more insight to share about that and what were, in your opinion, or at the panel, or in the panel, what were the reasons for that? And if this is specific to France, in your opinion?
That is limited to pilot scale?
My question is about the different option of the financing that you showed. Would you have some specific recommendation for the small-scale farm, and especially the small-scale farm which are like quite regenerative already, and which, if we take the baseline here as if today, wouldn't be rewarded by the carbon credits system? So would you have any streams or recommendation for the financing model for this highly regenerative small-scale farm?
So while I'm moving, I will answer your question regarding what do we mean when we say that the premiums are restricted to pilots. It's just what we get from the field. You know, we work with French cooperatives, and all of them told us they have some programs for which the agri-food pay the premiums. And then for like 80–90% of the crops, the agri-food value chain tell them, okay, either you provide me with a KPI, either if you're not happy, I will move to the other cooperative. I don't know to which extent it's true, but this is what they say. Yeah. And then I don't know if it's limited to France or to the other countries, but as these value chains are, cross countries, I figure it will be the same in other countries.
On this topic, if I just can complete, I think we find in our project more and more companies that are moving from practice-based incentive to outcome-based incentives, and with some measurable targets on carbon, but also biodiversity. And I think the trend is more on this now, from my side.
No, briefly on the scaling thing, I think now you probably have like pilots in between, and the question mark is how do you scale to the maximum? So I think it depends which spectrum we're speaking about. On our hand, we've moved away from like pilot. We're speaking about like, whether like partnerships with like big cooperatives, so that means like a significant volume for us, or carbon farming at rather scale, even from a certificate standpoint. But yeah, the question mark is how do you reach the 100% basically?
Do you want to say something about the biodiversity part?
Yeah, maybe quickly about the nature credit point. That I think a few questions on that. So my point here was that for nature credits, and especially when we talk about biodiversity, that it's always local specific. Yeah, we talk about site-specific biodiversity. So biodiversity on mineral soils in Spain are different than biodiversity on organic land in lowlands of Netherlands, right? So, and that makes it so unique and difficult to do these measurements. I didn't say it's impossible or you can't do it. I just said it's even more difficult, and we just heard also from the business side that what they want is they want a level playing field, they want harmonized approaches so it's not fragmented, right? And that makes it so difficult with these nature credits. And that was my point I wanted to make here. And that's why I also see it very early stage at the moment. But good point that you said that, yeah, there is examples on the ground that's starting off. And maybe one sentence to the Common Agriculture Policy, because you said 35% of the CAP should deliver to environmental objectives, right, I think? And that was by the DG Agri, I think, the report on estimation. Yeah, exactly. And the point from the Court of Auditors has been and always is that while there is this potential, it is not measured on the ground. And this is also being accepted by DG Agri and also repeatedly said by the JSC, saying, yes, there is the potential, and we can say what the objectives are. We have the result indicators, we have the output indicators, and all these things in place, but we don't know on the ground how much is actually being emissions reduced and carbon being captured and sequestered. And I think that's the big problem here. But I'm not saying, and that I think maybe a big important point, that the CAP has to do that all the time to measure it on the ground. But if you want to do these claims or say this is what the CAP is delivering, then of course you need to be sure, right? We cannot talk about potentials. We have to know. And then there was the last question, sorry, yeah, on when you made, yeah?
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to add that when we bring up issues with regulation, and in particular this time of development of nature credits and the nature credit roadmap, it's important also to look at the other way, what is the best way? How can we make sure that they work in alignment and in synchronicity with the rest of the regulatory framework, so that law that are in place, the regulations that are in place already, that's the common denominator. That's like the lowest. And the nature credits is what brings it the height. And that's totally possible. For example, the nature restoration regulation, where the idea is to do no more harm and to treat ecosystem services in a completely different way. Like the combined factor, together with the very strict MRV, could make this a tremendous tool. So I want us to be careful when we present that regulation could be damaged, to say, or it could be heightened and used, and we could work with the synergies in the regulatory framework and make this really excellent, sort of a race to the top as opposed to a race to the bottom. And not to forget, we're not just talking about exploitation anymore. We're talking about restoring nature, sometimes without building a swimming pool or whatever, a mine or whatever. And then we're treating the baseline in an entirely different way. So I just wanted to raise all the positive regulatory potentials to the people that are here, so they don't think that it's doom and gloom on the regulatory front. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think maybe we can, because we have to finish off, right, Edouard? Yeah, okay. Maybe we can take that, and maybe we can leave that as a statement, and we take that off to the next networking discussion round. And I don't think I have to react to this, but thank you very much also for your view on this, and yeah. And Clotilde,
should I answer the last? Yeah, the one on double claiming. So you can still claim that you actually financed something with whatever actors. So your claim can still be made that you have financed it and put the money. And actually this gives you no reward today. It's completely voluntary. All people that are financing voluntarily. And so you just have this chocolate medal. And I mean, this is the case, it has been the case for 20 years in the voluntary carbon markets. If you buy something, you just bought something. And most of the people actually don't even claim them, don't even write it somewhere. Then, so there is this thing about, so anyway, it doesn't give you any benefit so far, but I completely agree with that we could invent all kind of benefits that could be attached to this kind of funding. I mean, it would be really a good thing to do. Any kind of fiscal gratification, whatever, any kind of stuff. And then the other thing is, but I do understand that for operators, intermediaries, they need to sell something. And it's better for them to say, well, you're the only one that you will have the exclusive property right to your credits. But what's happening so far is that operators are selling permanent credits for non-permanent removals. I mean, I'm saying that the very product that is being sold and the very claim that is attached to it is changing, is being modified. So the product that has been purchased 2 years ago won't be the product that will be available in the next years. So I think I agree that it's a problem for the operators, but it doesn't change the accountability, I mean, the accounting system that just exists this way and can't be done another way. Done.
Well, just to close the debate, I think it's an open debate. We don't have the same position. I agree with you.
Used to agree.
Yeah. But it's good to have different thoughts on it. And we all wait for collective rules and claims so that we can launch the transition.
Yeah. Yeah. Romain, I don't know if you want to make a small contribution.
No, maybe just, do you want to say a last word or no, it's okay. So thank you very much for attending to this session. We can stay a few minutes or so if you have some questions.